Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, we are taking a look at the best decks to climb in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel with the release of K9 and a few other decks as well. Now, as you can see, I've already done the tier list. I actually did it on stream. If you want to go check that out, you absolutely can. That being said, I want to give you real quick my thoughts and ideas for what is going to be the best for the Master Duel climb, so stick around, right? First and foremost, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, which is K9. K9 is actually showing up alongside the new Vanquish support, so that is something to talk about. And obviously, you can see here on the tier list, K9 takes up a bunch of the top slots, as well as Vanquish in here as well. That being said, how much actually changes? Not a whole lot, right? The ban list doesn't change too much, even though Ryziel does get hit, and I do knock it down in a bit for that. The banning of Cross, while it matters for the Ryziel variants, the thing with Ryziel is that a lot of the decks are still very competent, regardless of whether or not Cross exists. And as you can see with both Onomet and Mitsu, I still value them pretty highly. And a lot of this is due to the fact that their end board doesn't change too much in regards to the quality of interactions that they have. They do miss out on a big piece of interaction. Being able to negate at point of resolution is very important, but it's not enough to warrant an unplayable or a significant drop-off. The biggest notable change, I would say, is that Onomat genuinely goes from a tier 1 deck to a tier 2. Moving on from that, when it comes to the new cards, we technically don't know anything other than what has officially been announced with those 5 cards from the selection pack, but realistically, we are likely to get the vast majority of the K9 cards, including Izana, Noir, Ripper, etc., as well as the rest of the Vanquish support, meaning that K9 and Vanquish are likely to be extremely powerful. I have them at the top of the game, pretty much. I do genuinely think that in terms of climbing, if you want to climb most effectively, your best option is to be playing K9 Vanquish. The reason for this is pretty simple. K9 Vanquish doesn't really lose to anything in particular. It's mostly going to be who the better player is. So if you're the better player, you're going to climb higher. And on top of that, it doesn't play into any specific hand traps very effectively, meaning that a lot of these cards that would hit something like Mitsurugi or Draco Tail, like for example, Contact C, can kind of be an issue for those decks. Doesn't really matter for this. On top of all of that, it can play on turn 0, meaning if the opponent's doing something, you also have a high chance of being able to do something on their turn. Not just hand traps, but genuine engine, which makes it even more advantageous in a best of 1 scenario where you don't have the option to side deck or change out your deck list. So overall, this is a very powerful deck, and I would expect to see it represented in said capacity. Moving on to the other K9 variants, Mitsu is just the 2 best engines kind of put together. You put K9 with Mitsu, and it's the 2 best engines, and you kind of go from there. It's very simple, but these are 2 very strong engines that provide a lot of value individually, so very strong as well. As for the Crystron variant, I think this one does something that the other 2 don't, in that it gives you negation. You get the negation off of something like FA Dawn Dragster and Cyber Dragon Infinity that the Crystron cards provide. On top of that, you have additional access to non-Xyz-centric mechanics, which is advantageous as well, so you're not specifically dying to something like a dimensional barrier, which I have seen quite a few people playing recently. That being said, it's not the best, but it is still a very solid option. It probably has the strongest of the end boards out of the 3 variants at the top here. As for other variants, things like Archmage also get a massive boost. Things like Cyber Dragon also get a massive boost. With that in mind, though, pretty much anything can play K9, like legitimately anything, similar in nature to the way that almost anything can play Mitsu. And the reason for this is because there's no real restrictions. You just kind of draw Izana, and you dump Lupus, and you've done the whole line, right? You don't even need to play things like Jokel or Noir. You could just play like 4 main deck cards and still get access to the K9 engine and the benefit of having that like additional hand trap, right? To be fair, you probably wouldn't want to play just those 4, but you get the point. Moving on, as you can see up here, we also have ourselves the Yummy cards, or more specifically, the Yummy decks. Here's the thing. Yummy Pure, I do not think is worth it most of the time. I think you are actively hurting yourself by just playing a pure variant of Yummy. That being said, Yummy with Sulford and Yummy with Mitsurugi are very, very powerful. Let's talk about the Mitsu stuff first. Mitsu is just generally one of the best engines. No restrictions, very solid, ends on Omni Negation, has a Raigeki-like effect, and consistently adds additional pieces of their engine for you to go through. So for the most part, you just constantly have additional things. Pair that with Yummy, which also has a million different points of interaction. It makes it so that you use the Mitsu cards to kind of break boards, and you use the Yummy cards to establish boards. And generally speaking, both of these synergize very well in the fact that they just have a ton of points of interaction you have to chew through to actually deal with their end board, right? So they're constantly going to be able to do something during your turn to interact. Sulford works in a different way. As opposed to establishing additional engine to play through boards, you're instead utilizing a smaller engine with more effective tools to get to the full end board, giving more room for non-engine. And I think overall in a best of 1, having more access to that non-engine while being extremely consistent makes up for the slight upgrade in engine that the Mitsu cards have. So overall, I think that Sulford is a little bit better than Mitsu in a best of 1 ladder style format. That being said, these are basically interchangeable and are overall similar in quality and are really, really powerful for this style of format. Going on to Draco Tail. Draco Tail in general, I think for the most part is just good. You can play with the branded stuff. I have it down here. But yeah, you can play with the branded stuff. You can play it pure. Both are very similar, basically negligible in the differences between them. But for the most part, Draco Tail is still extremely strong. And yes, I do believe that all of these decks are tier 1. I genuinely think that they are so very close in terms of power level that I think for the most part, they're all in that echelon of tier 1. Moving on to tier 2, here we have a bunch of other variants that I think are just worse. Pure Mitsu, Onomat Ryzeal, the Yummy, and Draco Tail with Magistus. All of this should be self-explanatory when it comes to these. Onomat is just like a weaker version of Ryzeal due to the ban of Cross. I don't think it's that much worse, but I do think it's slightly worse, and I do think it matters enough to drop it down. You're missing out on that very, very key point of interaction, whereas the Mitsu stuff kind of makes up for that. As for the other two, it's just you're playing without those additional engines, and it does matter. As for the Magistus cards in particular, the reason for this is pretty simple, but you're just allowing more interactions to matter, and the Magistus cards don't specifically provide additional value like the, having additional Urgulas or Pans would have for Draco Tail, and they don't really do anything that like the branded cards wouldn't either. So for the most part, you're just kind of making it making Draco Tail, I should say, more susceptible to interaction where it previously wouldn't be, right? You're just kind of losing to more things. Your end board is higher, but realistically, if you're able to do your full Draco Tail end board, it shouldn't matter whether or not you have the Magistus stuff. You should probably win that game anyway, unless your opponent has some sort of specific out. But realistically, if they have that, they could do the exact same thing against the Magistus stuff. So sure, yes, pure Draco Tail is arguably more susceptible to Red Reboot, but Magistus is more susceptible to Maxi and Fua. So for the most part, you're just more susceptible to more cards. That's basically it. Malice. Malice got hit very heavily. The problem is, you can play Malice with Mitsu. On top of that, Malice still has a ton of Cybers extenders to realistically make it very strong. It is the best combo deck to be playing right now. Hands down. Well, okay, sorry, Yummy's a combo deck. But outside of these top 4 decks, right, it is Malice. Malice is extremely powerful. It still has its same end board that it previously had. It's just going to get there less often and less consistently. Pair this with another engine, whether that be Mathmech, whether that be Adagnister, whether that be Mitsurugi. Mitsurugi's likely to be the best one, and you still get to do the whole Malice thing, right? If you just draw Dormouse, you just get to do the whole Malice thing. Another big thing, Impulse. Impulse is a godsend right now in this current format because it not only has the ability to interact with things like Izuna or Holly Sue, but it also interacts very favorably with pretty much everything in the current metagame. So, yeah, being able to also play Impulse is very nice. Moving on to Tier 3. I'm not going to speak too much on these. Lunalight is very strong, but it's susceptible to going second, and just playing through Disruption, it doesn't do that too well. Yes, Liger Dancer is a massive problem for a lot of decks. Who cares? You can't get to it half of the time. Man is also fairly solid. It's just kind of the... Man and Lab kind of fit this same bill of being the control decks of the format. That being said, control decks aren't the greatest right now, mostly due to the insane back row hate that is prevalent, and they're not quite to such like a high tier that they are better than everything else, so that they can kind of ignore those cards. Those cards still very much so hurt. Orcus is actually still fairly strong alongside the Mitsu stuff, or just with Fiendsmith. Its end board is still extremely powerful, so it's still something to look out for, and it also gets to play a ton of non-engine, which is very nice. Or you could buff it up with additional engine with the Mitsu cards. White Forest is strong and has very layered end boards, and it's very sticky and difficult to deal with, but is still very susceptible to cards like Droll, Fua, Maxi, etc., which makes it difficult to effectively play in a best of one. It's still competent, it still works, but it's not the best combo deck, and it's weak to a bunch of varied different cards. That being said, it's a little bit less weak to Fua than it has been in the past, which is nice. Next up, we have the newly unbanned Oak Snake Eye decks. Here's the thing, Oak didn't matter. I know so many people are like, oh my gosh, I'm mad. It didn't. I don't know who's telling you this. They're lying to you. I don't care if it's Joshua Schmidt. They were lying to you. It didn't matter. It never did. In Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, it never mattered. Okay? Got it? Cool. The decks got power crept. Straight up. There are just better decks than Snake Eyes right now. Right? Yummy is just Snake Eyes, but better. Right? It's just the modern variant of Sprite, and Sprite was already still good. Speaking of which, I do have Sprite on here as well. That being said, Snake Eye is still very good. It's still very competent, and you absolutely can climb with it, mostly due to the fact that it's kind of an auto-win going first. If you have the ability to just go first, you get to ignore things with Droll, which is very nice. You get to play the Millennium Engine, which is still very strong. You get to utilize things like Zombie Vampire, which is also very strong. While it's not as powerful as a lot of other decks, it still has a lot of varied layered interactions, and the Fiendsmith engine probably fits best into this deck. So there's that. As for the Fire King stuff, it plays on a different axis, similar to, I guess not a different, but it plays on a similar axis to that of the Mitsurugi cards. However, unlike Mitsurugi, it doesn't die to those same points of interaction. Not points of interaction. The same, like, answers that Mitsurugi does. So it has the same upsides without the same downsides, if that makes sense. Again, still not insane, but it is a good deck with which you can climb, and I don't think it's in a bad position. It's also one of those decks alongside Snake Eyes that I genuinely do not think people will be prepared to play against, which does give you a boon, right? Moving on to the Rogue decks, we're going to real quickly talk about these. For the most part, these are all just kind of underpowered, right? They don't really have the same power level of end board or extension or consistency. I do really quick want to talk about the Blue Eyes stuff. Blue Eyes theoretically is very strong. In practice, has the problem of dying to a bunch of different hand traps. And sure, you can, not dying, sorry, being heavily weakened by individual hand traps. And sure, you can like play through, you know, the My brain just died. You get access to like the Primate cards, which are very strong, and sure, you can play through individual hand traps, and you can end on one of the stronger end boards in the entire game. That being said, it doesn't matter because half of the time you're going to brick due to the fact that any one individual hand trap can kind of cut you off of anything, or you could draw a god hand, right? It's a very 50-50 high risk, high reward kind of deck right now, and it doesn't really have the consistency that it would need for me to put it higher. Sprite, I think, is also fairly solid right now. I think it's a little bit slept on. Having those Omni negations, or not Omni negations, just having negation so consistently through Elf and the like is very advantageous. On top of that, it's just a not terrible set of cards, right? Sure, you don't have Toad, but that's not really that big of a deal. You get to play a ton of other non-engine as well, and yeah, it's just pretty solid. It's not the best, obviously, but there's that. Those are the only two that I really wanted to talk about. Everything else here is pretty simple and pretty self-explanatory. For things like Sky Striker and Tenpai, pretty much it's just going second is pretty weak right now, and they don't really have the best way to establish a board, obviously. For like some of the fusion decks, they're just not capable of putting up the end boards that they need to as consistently as they should, right? Geminites maybe could go higher. This whole tier is not ordered, by the way. As for everything else, it's pretty just, you know, it's okay. It works, but it's not exceptional. New Live Twin cards. The new Live Twin cards are great. They're really, really good. They do help the deck significantly. It gives you access to Fiendsmith more consistently because you get to go into the Light Fiends more often, and it allows you to utilize them alongside the Fiendsmith stuff, just generally speaking better, right? However, the problem is this is too late, right? It's a control deck that has been outpaced by Man, and honestly kind of Lab as well. So it just doesn't really work right now. It's just been outpaced by a lot of the higher tier decks. Like pretty much all of these, had this come out before all of this, or at the same time as like a Malice, it could have competed. It just can't right now. It's just been outpaced. The last thing I want to make note of is, two things actually. Stun is actually pretty poorly positioned right now due to the fact that we have 3 different decks that all function very differently. Actually 4, technically. 4 different decks that all function very differently, and it's very difficult for Stun to favorably interact with each one of those. And on top of that, you have things like Draco Tail and Vanquish Soul, which basically gets to play on the opponent's turn. So if you just don't draw the immediate win the game button with a barrier statue or something like that, and that's your first action, they just get to immediately play the game, and then at that point, who cares? Also, like, Raisin just kind of kills the stun cards. Not entirely, but, like, he's very problematic for that. As for the Dark Magician, we are likely to get new support. We don't know exactly the cards that we are getting, but we're basically guaranteed at least the new Fusion, which is a very solid card. That being said, it's not really in service of anything particularly powerful. It kind of makes stuff, and it kind of ends on a board, but it's not anything fantastic. So, overall, I wish Dark Magician was better, but it's not. It's just not even capable of keeping up with that of Blue Eyes, so for the most part, it's in everything else. And that's pretty much all that I wanted to say about the tier list. Let me know down below in the comments what decks I missed, or what you think is incorrect or correct about this. Yeah, are you excited for K9? I'm very excited for K9. I'm very excited for Vanquish. Hopefully things go better. Yeah, prior to Vanquish, this game's not fun. But that's gonna be it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye.